So, are you feeling stuck in your career while also navigating the unexpected changes of being perimenopausal or actually in full on menopause? Well, you're not alone. Midlife can be a time of powerful transformation, but it often comes with challenges that no one really takes the time to prepare us for. So, today we're going to be diving into how hormonal shifts can impact our confidence, decision making, and career growth, and how you can turn this phase into the most empowering chapter of your life. So let's jump into the conversation today. I have an amazing guest. Her name is Emma. And here's the great thing about Emma, y'all. She is actually in Australia. So she
Mhm.
is up early on a weekend just so that we can have this amazing conversation. So I just want to thank you, Emma, for being a guest today.
Yeah, thank you, Jesse. So good to be here.
So tell the audience a little bit about you, and we'll jump right into the conversation.
Yeah, fantastic. So, Jesse, I'm a success coach and I work with senior leaders who generally find themselves at a crossroad in their career. And so I help them find the clarity and the confidence that they need to make that next career move. Now, this was me. This is where I found myself, hence why I do the work that I do. And I found myself in a place where all my usual go to strategies suddenly stopped working. And I ended up leaving a career that I loved. And to be honest with you, I still have lingering regrets over that. So I don't want that for anybody else. Hence why I now do the work that I do.
Well, I think that that's amazing because of your own experience. And I had, before preparing for our conversation today, I decided to look up some statistics. And I thought it was pretty interesting that they said that for midlife career transitions, that a significant number of women that are age 40 and above have experienced job interruptions, with 40% reporting to at least one interruption, and 70% of those were out of work for several months. And some of that can be due to being perimenopausal. That can be due to life situations. Maybe our parents are getting older, or we have to deal with different things of children. But also, it just comes down to really getting to the point of our lives where we're thinking to ourselves, there has to be something more.
There has to be a better way, right? There absolutely has to be a better way, 100%. We've hustled our way all the way through our careers, really feeling like we've been on this treadmill of really having to prove ourselves and climb the corporate ladder, never really stopping to celebrate where we get to, or to even just to be able to accept that, you know what, I'm really good at what I do, and I'm doing a great job. We're always looking for that next thing or feeling the need that we have to continuously prove ourselves to remain valid, as well as to remain current. And it's just this, this need that we seem to have that keeps us, like I say, on this treadmill. And then, for most of us, and, I feel that I was probably very average. I grew my career beautifully. I went to university. I invested a lot of, obviously, time, energy, and effort, in a career that I absolutely loved. I took my career breaks. I had my kids. I sacrificed some of the things that mattered, some of those important milestones for them. So, school certificates sometimes, or school assemblies, and all the things, doing my best to juggle it all, make it all happen, but with this constant need to be turned, on, always on, never actually having a moment, to rest or take it easy, because if it wasn't work, there was something else that kind of needed my attention. And I think, we then get to a point, and this is what I think perimenopause calls us to, is where we get to this point where it's kind of like, is this it? Like, is this really it? And is it enough? Because we are just at a transition where obviously our hormones are changing, and as a result of that, we are just almost stopped in our tracks. And this is why I say, for me, it meant that my usual go-to strategies didn't work. So, probably like many people in your audience, I've dealt with very difficult and complex situations. In fact, my background is in government, working in government. And I know that some of your audience are from government too, Jesse. And of course,
Yeah.
there's challenges for people
Yeah.
who work in government in the US at the moment. And so I understand that, what it's like to work in government in a big bureaucracy and how easy it
Yeah.
is to feel that you can get lost in that.
Mhm.
And so, but I'd navigated that, as I'm sure much of your audience has. I'd navigated it beautifully in the past, but I just found myself at this point where suddenly I couldn't navigate it. Where rather than, being able to use my intellect, if you like, it's like my brain had shut down. The brain fog had set in. The thinking and the analyzing and the problem solving had all stopped. And yeah, my body pretty much said, no, we're not doing this anymore.
But I would think because too, when you were sharing about just with being a mom and also growing in the
Mhm.
career, I feel that there's this innate, I don't know if it's intentional or if it's a survival mechanism that we have, that we develop up into 40, where we learn how to get it all done because we have to get it all done. And what happens is this quote unquote midlife crisis, before we think even throw in the hormones of it all, we kind of get to this point where we're like, I'm I just don't choose to continue
Yeah.
to be this superhuman. There's this unknown pressure that I feel like, this not unknown, unspoken pressure that is put
Yeah.
on us to wear all of the hats, to be the one that's mastering the ability to multitask it all. But then we're in this position then when we are like having these hormone changes and we're realizing like, I don't like how this feels. And there may be something that's going on. And I would love to like lean that into what is being perimenopausal, because I feel like those hormone changes are some of the things that we almost start to feel like I may need to be leaning into something. Something may not be going on, or something may be off. But what would someone think of as being perimenopausal? What are some of the traits that they may be experiencing?
Yeah, yeah. So just to back it up a tiny bit, if you don't mind, Jesse,
Hmm.
I think the first thing to note is that, as women, we're not designed for the current construct of leadership.
Yeah.
So, as Gen Xers, we were promised that we were the first generation to be able to have it all. We could have the career, have the family, have the success, and it would all be great. And so I
Yeah.
kind of like to describe it as the women who came before us,
Yeah.
they opened the door, but it's
Yes.
our job now, to change what's in the room. And
Yes.
so, like I say, so as we see leadership as it's demonstrated, as we've learned about it, it's very masculine. It's very
Mm.
much about productivity and getting stuff done, doing more with less, all of those types of terms. And as women, we don't respond very well to that. That's not our natural state of being. And so we've had to contort ourselves into this model of leadership that doesn't actually feel right. And the more we squeeze ourselves into it and the more we try and match into it, the further away we get from who we actually are and the true reflection of who we are. And then when we tie that all together, it's compounded by the social commentary that we get around women being lesser than, that women are, that we're unreliable, we're over emotional, we take things too far, we're too much, we take up too much space, we're all of the things. And, in terms of just talking just hormones, in relation to this conversation, I think it's really interesting to note and important to know, because I certainly didn't know this, is that men also have a hormonal cycle, but their hormonal cycle goes for 24 hours. Ours goes for 28 days. And so it's no wonder that they, don't understand why we don't turn up the same way, every single day in the way that they are able to. And so we've just got some information gaps, if you like, around what it's like to be a woman who works in this very masculine mode of leadership. And so, if you think about that, right, and you think about how, as women, we grow our careers, and we are, contorting ourselves into this model of leadership that's not really in tune with where we are. It's not in tune with how we source our power and our influence. You
Mm.
can see that by the time we get to midlife and perimenopause, which we'll talk about in just a second, we do get, it's like the tidal wave, right? We do get to the point where it's just like, I can't do this anymore. And it's not only just this kind of feeling of like, this just isn't what I signed up for. It's this whole body response, because we are more than just our mind. We have our power for women, we source in our bodies, not in our intellect, but it's our intellect that's been favored, over our intuition, for example. And so we just reach what I feel is like a tipping point, where not only our mind, but our body is also saying, no more, no more. Whereas if we were able to engage with leadership in a way that is actually more aligned to who we are, that is aligned to our cyclical nature, and if we can use, and this is what I encourage women to do, is that we use like our menstrual cycle as actually our blueprint for success. All the clues for how to be successful in our career actually lives inside our bodies, and the way in which our bodies are, physically and hormonally different to men.
Yeah.
And so, I like to use the seasons as an analogy for women. So I think about us as leading through the season. So we've got our monthly cycle that leads us through different parts. And when we can tap into that, we know when the perfect time is to ask for a pay rise, and when the perfect time is to, go and be by ourselves and write a strategy, for example. We know, I'm sure your audience have all had that experience where we can do a 12 or 14 hour day. We are on fire. But then, conversely, a few weeks later, we're like, actually, no, I think I can do my 6 or 8 hours and that's just about it. But we try and push through, right? There's been this commentary around being superwoman and having it all. And so we push through all of these things. And then, I feel like perimenopause is this time where our body just says, no more. You've pushed me far enough. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not designed to do this. And so, again, perimenopause is not a term I actually heard. I didn't even know what perimenopause was. I knew menopause was kind of for old ladies, but I had no idea that there was even this thing called perimenopause. I had no sense that I might be going through some kind of hormonal change. And I like to awaken it to not only a hormonal change where we get, the night sweats and the hot flushes and it's hard to sleep and the brain fog and the kind of physical symptoms that people might experience. But this, to me, is also a very energetic shift, and it's part of this seasons, right? So this is about part of our seasons of life as a woman. And so, we're moving into this phase of our life where we're moving from that kind of mother nurturer stage where we've, brought up children, and looked after them and done all the things, to this phase of where we are more a teacher and a leader. So to me, this actually represents the perfect time for us to step into our leadership, not step away from it. And I almost feel it like a universal calling, right? We need more women who bring the feminine side of leadership to balance out the masculine. I'm not saying the masculine's bad, but it needs balance. In the world right now, do we not?
Yeah.
Balance is really where we seem to be lacking right now. And so, perimenopause to me is a calling for women to step into that. It's a calling to do all that reconciliation around our past disappointments, our regrets, the things that haven't worked for us, to enable us to almost like clean the slate and then move into this next phase. And so in actual fact, perimenopause is akin to pre-menstruation, when we're cranky and, got, limited
All the
time.
things.
Yeah, all the things, right? Because we are at our most truthful. That is when the veil kind of between us, and some people say it's the veil between us and the divine, is at its thinnest. This is us at our absolute rawest and truest. And in fact, I love it. There's a lady called Lisa Lester who writes all about this. She's a fabulous writer about all things to do with women and living into their cycles. And she talks about that, this is the time of our life as older women, but also the time in our cycle that society tells us, oh, you're a bit much at the moment. You're a bit too messy. You need to keep all of that under wraps. Yeah. And that if we were actually to open the package and allow that woman, out into the world, that the patriarchy would be terrified. Terrified of what women would actually bring to the world, because this is when we really harness some true, power. And I say it's feminine, but it's not masculine power, it's very different power, for us to really make a difference and for us to really tap into, what you're talking about, because perimenopause is akin to this same this same energy. And in fact, it's reflected by the autumn archetype, which is the wild woman. And that just says it all, doesn't it? The
Yeah.
wild woman, right? She's untamed.
But I like that there were two things in your share that I really liked. It was one about seeing it as seasons. I
Mm.
was talking to my partner last night, and I was just telling him, I was like, oh my gosh, like it is not fun. And he was like, I'm glad that we don't have to go through this. And I was just like, out of curiosity, let me see how many periods and cycles we, and it said the average woman is having 450 periods in her lifetime. And he was like, his immediate response was like, oh my goodness.
Well, that's fascinating, right? Because I love that number, because we're so out of tune with our bodies, okay? And we see our period as it's a really inconvenience. Do you know what I mean? We're meant to be doing things that we don't want to do. You just look at ads, for example. We're meant to be roller skating and wearing, white pants. No, we're actually meant to be in bed eating chocolate. Do you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
what society expects from us. And so we hide, and like I say, we push through. But in actual fact, our period, the process of menstruation is exactly what perimenopause is, which is this process of being able to let go and clean out the old and make space for the new. So we get 450 opportunities in our lifetime to do that, right? And
Yeah.
if we don't do it, as many of us don't,
Yeah.
then we're backing those up. And by the time we get to perimenopause, we have a lot of making up that needs to happen. And this is why, and again, this is just, different people's views and ideas about perimenopause.
Yeah.
This is why it's such a big energetic shift for women, is
Yeah.
because if we were doing the work, if we were following our natural cycles and doing the letting go and the releasing and what's often referred to as purification in in our day-to-day lives, perimenopause would just be a breeze. I mean, we would just kind of transition our way through it, but we haven't. We've been taught that, it's inconvenient. We need to push through. We have not been taught what this whole process is actually all about, and the contribution that it actually makes, not only to us as individuals,
Yeah.
but actually, as us as women who are, connected just to the earth and the earthly cycles itself. So yeah.
But I also think because the amount of hormones, because
Hmm.
like let's be honest, everyone's cycle is a little bit different, um,
Yes.
and our ability to handle all of the feelings and emotions. I mean, because even I feel like that can be the humor that is out there about the rage of a woman that is menopausal and how she wants to kill everyone around her. Like everything about our hormones, it has some type of joke around rage or
Yes.
anger. But the hormones are what throws us. And in our conversation today is like, not only are we going to be going through this stage where our hormones, our body, as like you mentioned, is going through this purification process, we're also having to look at ourselves in a way of like, how do I move forward? So when someone is in this position of like, I realize something's different
Hmm.
and I have this career, which sometimes can become our identity,
Yes.
what should we be looking at to know that there isn't anything necessarily wrong, but to start taking the first steps to explore what can be this new direction for us?
Yeah, yes, yes. And so this is where, we need to move out of our heads and
Mm.
down into our bodies. And so, the thing about women, particularly when they find themselves in this stage in their career, is that they're often, they're senior, they've got the perfect balance of experience, expertise, they've got the position and the level of authority. And then, of course, they get hit with this hormonal tidal wave where, like I say, the go to strategies that used to work suddenly stop working. And so we have to do something different. And I think, sometimes that's the hardest lesson that we have to learn is that we can no longer keep doing what we've always been doing because it's not going to work for us anymore. And so the first step is to recognize that, is to recognize where you are in your life. And then, we get the opportunity then, I feel like, to make a choice. And this, again, it's a bit of a crossroad. And we get the choice to see this as the invitation. Is this the invitation for me to now reconcile, these past disappointments, these regrets, and use this as the transition phase that it is to move into my next phase of life? Or am I going to continue to medicate, take the sleeping pills, and do all the things and try and push it through? And so obviously for me, the answer to me is we need to accept the transition for what it is. And we need to do the work. This is when leadership stops being about learning about more strategies or tactics. This is about doing the inside work. This is about actually coming home to ourselves. And like I say, doing that process of reconciliation, clearing out the stuff that doesn't work for us anymore and allowing the space for something new. And for women, there's often four key areas. Well, there's four key areas. Sorry, I should say there's four key areas that I work with women on, which tend to be the most common around the things that get them stuck and keep them stuck. And the first one is what we've already talked about, which is about being on that treadmill. And so, this sense that we derive our worth from what we do. And this is this identity piece that you just made comment on, Jesse. And so when we tie our worth and our identity to our work or to our job title, then we don't feel worthy for who we actually are as a person, and we lose ourselves as a person in all of that. And this is why we're changing and contorting ourselves to fit in what we think other people expect from us, rather than, for who we actually truly are. And what that does is it means that we start taking desperate action rather than inspired action, right? Because we're desperately trying to prove ourselves. Whereas when we heal that part of us, or when we reconcile that part of us, we can start to take more inspired action. And of course, when we take inspired action, we're using our intuition, we're using all of our senses. And of course, we're inspiring other people around us as well. And then the second one that I really focus on with my clients is around trust. So ability to be able to trust ourselves. So again, often what we do is we look outside externally to validate our ideas.
Yeah.
And so we might, we might have a really big, hard and gnarly decision to make. Okay, and we just feel we lose confidence in our ability to be able to make the right decision around that.
Yeah.
Okay, and when we trust ourselves, then it's not about I'll always make the right decision. It's about I can make a decision and I'm also allowed to change my mind. So if it doesn't work out in the way that I expected it to, or if it didn't, follow through in the way that I thought, it's not a problem. It's no reflection on me, because I'm allowed to change my mind and I'm allowed to make another decision. And that just creates this sense of peace, right? Where we're not in that state of kind of anxious or anxiety of having to be perfect, and get everything right. And so that one is another really big one that I often find with my clients. Yeah. And then the other one is about our ability to feel like we can speak up and speak out about the things that are important to us. And so it's very easy for us, and particularly as we grow our careers, we start to say the things that other people want us to say. We lose sense of our values. We've lost our North Star, if you like, because we're really getting captured in the group think and, doing and saying what other people expect us to say, rather than calling out the things that just don't feel right. And so, again, it gives us permission to feel stuff. It gives us permission to say, do you know what? I know that sounds logical, and I know that it all kind of adds up and the data's there to support it, but something about that just doesn't feel right. And I think we should take some more time to explore that or look into it. We don't say that, but that's the value, that we bring as women. And so again, when we can kind of come home to our values, find our voice, we are able to step into that more empowered version of ourselves as we go through perimenopause. And then the final one is about really just accepting who we are in all our wild, crazy, raging even ways, right? And that we start to understand that actually, no, it's our difference that sets us apart. The thing about as we grow our careers through the ranks is that we become known because we're different, not because we're the same. And yet we spend our whole life and our whole careers trying to be the same to be accepted. And so when we can accept our difference, accept what makes us unique, accept our quirks, accept our ideas and thoughts and, the way in which we think, then we bring our true and authentic self to the leadership. This is when we bring new and fresh perspectives about things. This is when we're able to tackle some of those really old problems that we haven't been able to solve before, can now be solved, at the table. And it's so interesting. And I don't have the stats around this, but there's lots of research that shows that when women are at the negotiating table, things like wars stop. Do
Mm,
you know what I mean? Conflict is reduced. We
yeah.
have, and this is what I say about how women source their power differently. We have a very different way that we can show up around that leadership table, and a way that provides greater balance to the conversations. And we can have a significant impact. We are much more powerful than we think we are when we live as, when we access that feminine side of us. So, yeah.
Well, and the thing is that even with the steps or the different areas that you focus on, I feel that the first four are what lead to the action part. Because
Mm,
if we're not trusting ourselves and we're having, that's where sometimes the perceived lashing out is occurring, because that is a result to either the sedation of
mm,
feeling what we're feeling, the internal pressure that we may be putting on ourselves to people please or to play nicely. So then, because we have the hormone side of it, then because we're frustrated, then
mhm,
that's what reaction happens with the lashing out. And when we're in the workforce and we're going through this internal battle because we're not trusting our body, we're not acknowledging what's going on, or we're still trying to exist in our workspace or in our career or in our business the way that we were before we realizing we were going through this, that would lead to the way that we're communicating it. And I think it's not necessarily that we're communicating it, and I think you even hinted at that. It's not that it's being communicated. Sometimes what the negative connotation comes from isn't that you're communicating, it's how
mhm.
it's
Yes,
being
absolutely.
communicated.
Yes, yes, yes. And of course, this is all of our internal beliefs, right? And our stories about who we are, what makes us important, how we stay safe in the world. Things that might beliefs that might have been internalized by us, even way back in our childhood. For example, about what it means to be a good woman, and we all know that that some of those narratives around are that you don't upset people,
Hmm.
that you don't impose yourself on them, that you don't take up too much space, etc., etc. And
Yeah.
so this work is our opportunity to question those and to decide for ourselves whether or not they're still true, and are they serving us? And if not, then how can we empower ourselves or rewire our subconscious, if you like, for something new and different that is empowering, that does allow us to change our mind about the way in which we've been or the way in which we want to show up in the future.
And with the example you just gave, immediately I had this visual aid of putting on the shirt that's too tight.
Hmm.
It's like it feels uncomfortable. So like, and the shirt that's too tight is the ideology of what we think we should be doing and what we're wanting to be, but because it's not fitting anymore,
Hmm.
now we're moving around and we're feeling like something's not right, and that we might be frustrated because you're like, why did I put this shirt on? And or whatever that situation is, that's the same thing that we're going through from a hormonal standpoint, when we're still trying to hold on to the beliefs or the ideologies that were imposed on us, in our younger years. It doesn't fit anymore, and we know
No.
it doesn't fit because of the way that it is on our skin, but we aren't allowing ourselves the freedom to say, you know what, I need to just go ahead and get another shirt. And then now
Yes,
that's
exactly.
why we're here. Like, I need another shirt. I need to find something that's going to fit, that I'm going to feel amazing in, so that I can be in the workforce and show up the way that I desire to show up and to add value in the way that we need to be adding value.
Mm.
And it doesn't have to be in a masculine perspective. That can just be, how are you adding value? And
Yes,
I think that, especially for those of us that are now in our 40s and 50s and 60s, some of the masculinity had to exist because of how much resistance that we were feeling during those
mhm.
moments. And I'm not going to say that we haven't escaped all that. However,
Yeah.
however, in 2025, it still isn't as horrible as it might have been being a woman in a C-suite, or being at any level of management, or even just being a business owner. We don't have to have, I feel like, from a perspective, I feel like you either had to be this damsel in distress, but then that didn't get you that far, or you
Mhm.
had to be the one that's like kicking doors down,
Yes.
um, no hose bar, but then they would label you as being like abrasive or whatever it is because
Yes.
um of that. So we never, I don't feel like the ability to be in a neutral space.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, well, and so do you know that's so right, isn't it? Right, we had to take on masculine traits in order to get ahead, and like you
Yeah.
say, smash glass ceilings, right?
Yeah.
Some of the terminology, and even just that terminology suggesting that women are in places that they don't actually belong. And so,
Mm.
we had to move through all of that in order to get ourselves where we are now, which is why I kind of liken it to the like, okay, we're in the room now. Now we need to rearrange the furniture.
Yeah.
Do you know? And the women before us did an awesome job to get us in the room, but we can now rearrange the furniture. And to me, what I've noticed for myself in particular, I was very hard exterior. So I thought I was a great leader. And to all intents and purposes, I was good. I was very good at my job. That's why I got promoted so high. I had lots of mentors and people looking after me, all the things. But there are also things about my leadership that I really regret. And a lot of those have that hard edge where I had the opportunity to bring a level of softness, but I didn't because I didn't know how to, because I didn't know was I could, and I had no access to that, whereas I have a lot more access to it now. And so to me, it very much is what Brene Brown talks about. She talks about taking off the armor. To
Yeah.
me, it's time to take off the armor. It's okay to be a woman. In fact, it's wonderful to be a
Yeah, it's
woman.
amazing.
Yes, you know how we are so lucky. Our bodies are so incredible. Our connection, to nature, to the world, to the universe is so inspiring, and we
Mhm.
are naturally connected, through her ebbs and flows. We are a microcosm, in fact, of Mother Nature. And if we look at her just as an analogy, right, we can see the destruction of the world. We kind of feel a bit like that as women as well. And as we build ourselves up, as we find and take our place at the boardroom table, then Mother Nature, the same will happen in the environment as well, because we are there. That's our job, right? We
Yeah.
are the nurturers, we are the carers, we are the peacemakers. And it's like I say, it's a beautiful balance to the doing and the hustling that the masculine brings. And it's not to say that women are only feminine and men are only masculine. Obviously, I'm talking about an energy. I'm not talking about a gender. But what I'm saying is that when we allow our feminine energy to come and we balance it up with the masculine in the room, but also the masculine we have with ourselves, because you do have to take action, right?
Mhm.
We can't be
Yeah.
effective by just, thinking and feeling. We do have to actually do things as well. But what it means is, like I say, we take inspired action. So we're not hustling our way through or white knuckling, but that we're actually, inspiring and allowing. Women are very much designed for receiving. Men are very
Yeah.
much designed for giving and doing. Mm.
And that's a perfect transition really into the question I wanted to ask is, like, we're going through these transitions, of course. And so what mindset shifts are necessary for women that are currently in the space that are wanting to navigate between career transitions and navigating through being in menopause or being perimenopausal?
Yeah. So I think the first thing we need to do is to be educating and talking about perimenopause. Like I say, I didn't even know it was a thing until about 3 or 4 years ago. I'd never even heard it as a term. It's not something that we talk about. And so we need to educate ourselves around these, and we need to be talking to our daughters, about their bodies, about their periods, about how it's okay to have those days where you just want to lie in bed. And it's okay to be cranky and get things off your chest and help them, learn and understand how to channel those things. For us as women, in terms of us being in our career and where we are right now, awareness is always the first step to any change. And so just becoming aware of how am I, like, what are my values anyway?
Yeah.
And, given if that's my values and I'm doing this, does it even match up? Like,
Yeah.
where are the gaps in these types of things? Yeah, yeah. And then really making a decision about, do I want to do the deep inner work? Do I want to take the personal development journey that's I'm being called to do,
Hmm.
to come on the other side of this perimenopause, into all the glory of postmenopause, which is us as the leader and the teachers, of the world, those who are leading a new way of doing things. And it's hard. It's
But
hard and it's unrelenting, but it's necessary. It's absolutely necessary in order to be able to expand and rise to those levels.
I think it's important for us to work with someone like you to be able to learn the skills to be able to navigate through it, regardless if we're looking to change careers, or you may want to still stay in the same field, but you're feeling these shifts that are occurring in yourself and you're wanting to find a way to embrace it. In a way that's going to allow for you to thrive, because we don't need to just be enduring life, and definitely not at 40 plus. I am not enjoying anything. Maybe at 14, but definitely not
No,
at 40 plus. We're not enduring, we're thriving. Like, I am 40 plus thriving, and that's all that I'm
yes.
going to be doing. And I think it's important for us to, and like that's the whole goal of even this podcast, is to be able to create a space to be able to hear from other people, how they've been able to navigate it, or for the listeners to be able to learn skills to be
Mhm.
able to find their way on the other side, regardless if it's perimenopausal, maybe it's even just dealing with grief. Like, there are more things that are connecting us than things that are separating us. And to be able to hear, like, I'm feeling something weird right now. Like, I know that even when I was 39, I became very present to the fact, what do I want 65 to look like? What do I want 85 to look like? And I feel that
Mhm.
you are more intentional once you get closer to 40. And it's not a, oh my gosh, life is about to end. It's like,
No.
okay, like, if we're going more towards this end, I'm definitely going to make it the best that I can make it.
Yeah, and there's no
Where, like, in your 20s, you're like, I just, I'm out here, la da 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 da. Like, we think we have goals, and we can. And it's not to say we didn't. But I think the tenacity and the intentionality behind what it is. So we're going to be going through these hormonal changes. They are what they are. There's
yeah.
no way around it. Like, there's no, I don't go through that. Like, I don't know if it's a condition. I mean, as far as I'm aware, everyone that gets a cycle,
Mhm.
we all go through it. So there's no, I just want that to skip. I mean, because
Mm,
if anything, I probably would have skipped at least 50 of the 400.
mhm.
Um, that we could have been experiencing. But I think that we do get to this place in our lives where we're realizing, like, I really want to be able to use this next chapter of my life, because that's where this conversation even came, because I was talking to one of my really good friends who only has 3 more years before she's fully qualified to retire. And I'm
Mhm.
just like, I mean, it sounds like some days you'd be like, I would love a month off. But like 30 years off of not ever doing anything else, I mean, like, I would be over it.
Yeah.
I would be over it. I mean, it can be exciting, but I think just naturally, especially for those of us that have active full lives, we would truly not just be sitting in the house. We would want to do something that we're passionate about. So even if we're in this place where I know something's different, maybe I need to change my career, or it might be I want to do more like different things in my career, but I'm going to be embracing it in a way that's healthy. And
Mhm.
that's where working with you will help people being able to find out what is this new truth
Yes,
that I
absolutely.
need to embrace so that I can get to the other side. And is that the best assessment that I should be giving?
Yeah, and look, and I think the other thing too, right, is that it doesn't have to be long and drawn out. Do you know,
Yeah.
like we don't have to draw things out in a long way. One of the things I love about the work that I do is it can be reasonable, it can be quite rapid. Do you know, we don't have to be in years of therapy,
Yeah.
in order to resolve and reconcile some of these things. It can actually happen quite quickly.
Hmm.
But it's an invitation. I like to think of perimenopause as it's an invitation to our next stage and our next phase. And for many, we're asking ourselves what the point is on one side, but what we're also really asking is like, how will people remember me? What is my legacy that I'm going to leave? Like, and that's why we
Hmm.
think, oh, is this all there is? And so we want to step into these wiser, more mature years where we've got the experience, we've got the expertise, we've got the authority in our positions to really make a difference, and we want to be that woman who can lead from the front, right? Who like
Yeah.
the women before us, who can trailblaze a new way of doing things. And so, like I say, it's an invitation to do that, but we can't do that on our own. In fact, women are not designed to work on our own, and we
Right.
can't see our own, we can't see our own blind spots. We can't see our own hurts and wounds that we've lived, for the last 40 odd years with. We need someone to help us and to help us see them and bring them out so that we can heal them and we can change them and we can, do all the things. So, yes, 100% agree.
Fantastic. So, for those people that are listening that want to connect with you, what are the best ways to learn more about you and the things in which you are able to support them with being able to overcome?
Yeah, lovely, excellent. So I'm only on LinkedIn. I don't do Facebook or any other social media. So I'm on LinkedIn. My name is Emma Mason, and I'm in Australia. So you'll find me there. My website, nice and easy, www.emmamason.com.au. Don't forget the AU for Australia. So you can have a look at my work and get a sense for what I do over there. I've got an amazing program, which is called the Seasons of Leadership. And it's a one-on-one intensive 6-month program where I work with my clients, and the transformations that come just from those 6 months is phenomenal. Some of them we finish up a little earlier if they want to expedite their way through it. But it really is, it's about taking off that armor that Brene Brown calls, and it's about rewiring our subconscious, creating new and more empowering beliefs and creating a new vision for ourselves and for what, life could look or can look like when we're not holding on to the past.
Well, I truly appreciate you sharing and giving such great insight for other women to just really find their direction and their way in this season. So I just want to say thank you so very much for being a guest today.